Okay, guys, I wanted to share what I've been geeking out over for the last hour because I had a huge history connect the dots moment. One of the coolest things about history is that you can see large scale spiritual warfare and just the Lord at work at like this grandiose scale. So, super cool. Bear with me. We're gonna hit a lot of details. We're gonna start really like small scale and then we're gonna go super big scale, and it's gonna be so cool. So, stay tuned. I'm reading my lovely Silk Road book. I love her dearly. And we're going to start today in the 300s and we're just going to go from there. So, 300s are super awesome for Christianity, okay? So, we are in Rome, the Roman Empire. Emperor Constantine is emperor at the beginning of the 300s. He is so critical to the Christian faith. He makes Christianity the official religion of Rome, of the Roman Empire. He commissions his mother Helena to go restore Jerusalem and other archaeological, well, now they're archaeological, but restore other sites across Israel, Judea, Jerusalem, after they've been pillaged from previous conquerings. And so you see a lot of restoration in Christianity. In 325 is when the Council of Nicaea happens. So all of these Christian leaders from across the Roman Empire get together. They create the Christian Creed. They're discussing theological ideas to kind of create like a baseline for what Christianity is. There's a canonization of what should be in the Bible. And so you get all of these ideas coming together in unification. And at the same time in Persia, the Persian Christian leaders were not invited to the Council of Nicaea because that was for Romans only. And so they have their own councils and they come up with their own creeds and stuff. And they wind up actually agreeing to the same creeds and canons that happen in Nicaea. So this is all the early 300s, okay? In the late 300s, you see the councils of Carthage and Hippo, and so you have more canonization. So across really the known world, you have a unification of Christianity. The Bible is being translated in all languages that are spoken throughout the Roman Empire. So Christianity is being preached and spread like never before. And this book is on the Silk Road. So it's talking about the role that Christianity had in the Silk Road and the role that the Silk Road played in Christianity. So you're having the super spread of Christianity in the 300s. So cool. It's flourishing. And then you hit spiritual warfare. Like no other. And this is where it gets kind of crazy, so you're gonna have to stick with me. Rome doesn't officially collapse to the 500s, but we'll get to that in a minute. The real fall of Rome begins in the 400s because that's when you have Attila the Hun and the Huns conquering across Central Asia, the Near East, is really as far as they get. Attila dies in France, in case you didn't know. I learned that recently from this book, actually. Okay, sidetracked. So there's it's hard to exaggerate the Dark Ages role. Literacy levels plummet, building in stone all but disappears, the Silk Road shrinks, and pottery kind of vanishes from, like, these pottery trade routes all but vanish. There's so little smelting that it's measurable in the polar ice caps of Greenland because of the pollution level drops. Okay, so the Dark Ages are horrible to be a person in. Right, and you just had this unification of Christianity, and then immediately in the 400s, you actually, the Christian leaders start bickering again, because then some people feel like they were overlooked in all of these councils, and then there's an outbreak of Christian militancy, which saw the destruction of a lot of Zoroastrian temples, which were also really critical, mostly in Persia regions, but also some in the Roman Empire, like modern day Turkey. We'll get there. They're so critical in this. And so the book even says, like, this should have been the seminal moment in point in history where the muscles and the brains of the Christian religion engaged properly. However, because of all that is happening, instead of welcoming a golden age, the Christian church found a new wave of persecution heading their way. Okay, so Christianity flourishes in the 300s, but just really takes a dip in the 400s, and you're fighting all this spiritual warfare. And history never repeats, but it always rhymes. And so something that's talked about a lot is the environments that raise tyrants up. This is most commonly discussed with the rise of Hitler, because Germany after World War I was left so destitute and just was reeling from the repercussions and reparations that they faced after World War I, that it made a prime environment for Hitler to rise up, this power and this anarchy, or not anarchy, tyranny without a lot of conflict and without a lot of people fighting back on him, because they're just, it's like, well, who else is going to do this for us, you know? So we actually see that with the rise of Islam. So crazy cool. Okay, so 400s, everything starts to fall apart. 500, Rome falls, and the Byzantine Empire starts taking over at this time, but Persia really comes to flourish in this time because of Attila the Hun taking over these territories. So there's a unification there that happens with the Persian Empire, and so it shifts to Hun control for a little while there, and then the Huns never really created an empire, but they did create unification. We'll get there in a little bit too, as we talk about, Genghis Khan and the Mongols, my favorites. But so Persia starts to rise up, Rome falls in the 500s, and as Persia's rising up, this is when Muhammad has his visions and writes the Quran in the 600s. And so then Islam rises in this lost world that is not able to read. So remember, we just canonized the Bible, but most people cannot read anymore. There's a lack of literacy and unification in the Christian church once again. And so Islam seems like the answer. It is spreading like wildfires throughout the region. Okay, so then by the 800s, Islam is the dominating religion in this area. The Byzantine Empire becomes established in the 300s, but it really doesn't hit its stride until the 6 to 800s. After the fall of Rome, the Byzantine Empire took over a lot of that territory. So if you look at the overlap of these areas, the Byzantine Empire essentially becomes geographically the Roman Empire. Okay, Byzantine Empire is where Orthodoxy becomes the prominent religion. And so as the Byzantine Empire kind of really rises and becomes a centralized power by the 800s to 1000-ish, they create once again a centralization of Christian religion, a set look of how Christian faith should look. Okay, and mind you, Persia is very, very dominant in Islam. Islam has spread throughout the Mediterranean. So you do have these conflicting things, which is crazy because they're also neighbors. Byzantine Empire is predominantly, like, the centralization of their capital is in modern day Turkey. Meanwhile, Persia is not too far away. So you have these two butting heads all the time. Okay, thousands roll around. This is when the Crusades happen. So 10,000s and 1100s is the Crusades, which lots of things on the Crusades, but you see this head-to-head with Islam in the day that really radicalized the world as a whole. Lots of extremist beliefs for everyone. Different subject for a different day. But then in the 1200s, my favorite, Genghis Khan steps onto the scene, and what he does is he unifies the people, which is crazy because unlike the Huns, the Mongols do create an empire. The Mongolian Empire spreads all throughout Asia, throughout, like, as far reaching as China, all the way through Europe. But what's relevant about that is that once again we have this unification, and the Silk Road flourishes again because of this trade route and this communication. And so the Byzantine Empire actually lasts until 1453, which we'll get back to in a minute. But the Ottoman Empire rises up out of Persia. So when Attila the Hun conquers all this land, Persia winds up falling. That is the fall of Persia, is and technically it's Chinggis Khan. I need to stop saying Genghis Khan. Chinggis Khan falls Persia. And so then Persia and Islam take a little bit of a back seat, and we see the Crusades, Christianity's back on the rise. And so this is like crazy spiritual warfare over hundreds of year periods. And I'm going to summarize this at the end, I promise. But then as the Ottoman Empire is rising, they're championing Islam. So now you have the Byzantine Empire doing super well, really unifying Christianity. Christianity is back on the market. Everyone is hearing the gospel for the first time in a while in a different light that is unified across the Byzantine Empire. But then you have the Ottomans coming up championing Islam. And so you have this crazy, crazy head-to-head that goes on for, I mean, truly centuries, like 1,000 years. I'm not even kidding. But then as Orthodoxy is kind of taken a hold in Europe and the Mediterranean, the north side of the Mediterranean, I would say, and the Ottomans are starting to take over the south, and they're conquering into Rome, you have the fall of the Byzantine Empire in the 1400s. And Byzantine Empire falls. So now you have another collapse of Christian belief because Islam is taking over these areas. Mosques are being built all over the previously Christian sites. This is when we see the famous mosques in Jerusalem go up over the previously Judaic temples. And then who steps onto the scene not 30 years after the fall of the Byzantine Empire? Martin Luther for the Reformation. Isn't that insane? How the Lord was like, ha, you thought we were down, but we are certainly not out. And Martin Luther obviously revolutionized Christianity as we know it today. And it is just mind-blowing to see the way that spiritual warfare that we face on a daily basis interacts with history, and we can just see that on a global scale, right? So in summary, in the 300s, you have this boom of Christianity. Christianity is flourishing, and then Satan's coming in, and he says, no, it cannot happen. And so then the 400s plunges us into the Dark Ages. In the Dark Ages, Islam rises as a superpower religion. And this goes on for centuries. And then in the thousands, and then through the Byzantine Empire, and Crusades, you start to see Christianity rise back up again. And Satan starts getting hit back a lot harder. And you have serious spiritual warfare on a large scale that's involving politics and empires. And it involves the world at this point, because with each day, the known world is getting bigger. And right when it looks like Islam is going to take over because the Byzantine Empire and Orthodoxy is getting taken over, Martin Luther steps onto the scene and the Lord says, nope, not today, brother. And I could just go on and on, but it is so cool to see the Lord just, he just knows what he's doing in a grand scale that, we cannot comprehend. The human lifespan is 70 years. We just crossed over 1,000 years. We crossed 1,100 years in this time period, and it's just so cool. Anyway, I just wanted to share that this morning because I thought it was so cool, and I geeked out over it for an hour.